Everyone, I am your host, Guy, for the Unseen Journey, brought to you by Operation Red Wings Foundation. If this is your first time joining us, do us a favor, reach down there, hit the like and subscribe. Drop us a hello in the comments. It all helps. We appreciate it. Operation Red Wings Foundations provides free retreats for veterans, their spouses, and their families. So it's a huge and awesome resource. If you know anyone who ever served, hit our website up after you hit that like and subscribe. Today, we've got a special guest. We're joined with Brian. Brian, how's it going?
Good, man. How you guys doing?
Doing well, brother. And I think you said you were coming from somewhere much colder than where I'm at. Where you at?
I'm up in, I was about to say Boise, but I'm not in Boise anymore. I just moved up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho area.
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And you said it's a nice, brisk, like 15 or something?
Yeah, 15 degrees. We finally warmed up.
Gosh, finally warmed up. Yeah, we cooled down to like 50. Oh man! So Brian, tell us a little bit about your background, service, kind of those things.
I'll start out like I was just born and raised in Northwest Montana.
Nice.
And then I ended up moving in with parents over in Spokane, Washington, and my stepmom was at the time she was a captain in the Air Force. And when I graduated high school, I couldn't quite decide what I wanted to do. 9/11 had just happened right after I graduated. Mm-hmm. And it took me about a year and a half to decide that I wanted to join. And interestingly enough, I actually answered a newspaper article for the Navy. They worded it three different ways. That was back before the internet became big. So
nice.
So I answered it. And each time it was a Navy recruiter, so I was like, well, I guess it's meant to be. I might as well go and check out what it's about. So went in, took the ASVAB, talked to the Navy recruiter for a little while, and it's like, I don't know. Meanwhile, my stepmom, she was just like, oh, you should go look at the Air Force. So I did, and then of course she was pushing me that way, so I ended up joining in 2003.
Nice. So, you joined just slightly after me. I joined the Army October 2002, and I no offense to my brothers in arms, but I think you made the right choice. I think a lot of us would say that looking back.
That's what everybody says, Yeah. I look back and I go, yeah, I think I did, but at the same time, I don't know. My job in the Air Force, while I liked it, I didn't like it. Like I wanted to do something more and be more part of something.
Gotcha.
That it wasn't offered for me. So.
And so you were in service like 10 years, I think you said?
Yeah, 10 years from 2003 to 2013.
Okay, cool. And then after transitioning, what have you kind of done since then? What's kind of been the work life or those types of things?
Since I got out, I've been a deputy sheriff up here in North Idaho for two different counties. Nice. One is on the water, the other one is on the road. And then after 2 years of doing that, I went and had a plethora of jobs, from working in a small little factory putting rebuilt engines together to framing houses, climbing towers. Loved that job. But now I work at Lowe's up here in Coeur d'Alene. So
that's cool. And you got a partner with you, right?
Yeah, I got Loki. Hey, Loki, come here. Come say hi, buddy. This is my service dog, Loki.
Yeah. So, one of the true unsung heroes right there.
Oh, definitely. I never realized how much a game changer having a service dog is.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got mine. His name is Finn. He's a German Shepherd. I learned that apparently on the GSD. That's in a previous episode from another German Shepherd dog. Mom actually taught me that, because originally my guess was, good soccer driver or something like that. Yeah, I didn't know the terminology. I wasn't with it. So when you were in service and you were getting ready to transition, I mean, that was like 10 years ago, probably a lot like, most people's transition, didn't know or have a lot of access to resources. But since then, you found your way to Operation Red Wings Retreat. Tell me a little bit about finding your way to Operation Red Wing Retreat and kind of what that has done for you in your life.
Well, yeah, like when I got out, I was kind of lost, didn't know any resources, no matter what you go through. I can't even think of the name of the class now that you're supposed to attend when you get out, that every branch has.
Yeah, just the transition. Yeah, I
Yeah.
got you.
Yep. And then I'll fast forward after a divorce, after being a deputy for a couple years. I ended up getting divorced, and then I got remarried. And part of me getting remarried and redoing myself was trying to figure out more about what's going on with me. So I started going to the VA, and they just weren't doing enough. I'm like, well, the VA is not going to help me. I'm going to have to help myself, otherwise, no one is going to do it for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. When did you go through you went, I assume, individual male retreat? When did you go through that one?
Yep. Yeah, I went through that one. It would be this last summer was 2 years now. So
Okay. Okay.
2 years
Nice.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I went through, gosh, 4, yeah, I think, no, yeah, about 4 years ago. Okay. So you found yourself to the retreat. You have a service dog, right? What were the things
Yep.
that you were experiencing or going through or living through that kind of led you to want to start to seek out these tools and resources?
Large part of it was just my divorce and the way my wife was telling me all these issues that were wrong with me. And I never felt whole, complete. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do in life. I was just spinning my wheels, from job to job to job to job. And while I was at those jobs, some of them I just burned bridges left and right. And I just was angry, mad, frustrated all the time.
Ah,
And I'd show up and to like the VA appointments, and I went actually saw a psychiatrist there for PTSD, and I was talking with her, and I was like, "Hey, I'd like to know a little bit more information, like service dog, and whatever I can to kind of help me." And she flat out said, "Well, service dog, I don't want you to have one. I don't want you relying on it. And the best treatment you're gonna get is right here in my office."
wow.
And I was like, "Well, that just completely turned me off. Yeah, screw you. I don't think so. I'm not gonna do that." And right then and there, I quit seeing her.
I do want to give one shout out to your, I think you said it was your ex spouse for being able to provide you with some awareness, right?
Yeah.
I think that is part of those unseen elements and that unseen journey is somewhere in there. We have to have that person who says, "Hey, things aren't okay." For me, it was Master Sergeant Mike. Mike was like, "Hey, bro, let's pop the hood. Something's not firing right. We need to start. You need to start getting some help and getting looked into and stuff." So I think that's really cool. And I would even throw out there, right? Like if you haven't done it yet, the spouses retreat for ORW Foundation, just an incredible, incredible tool because and I know you're remarried now. It helps
Yep.
so open up that, I'm going to call it getting stuck, right? Because oftentimes, like you said, you were angry a lot, right? Oftentimes us veterans, all of us humans, we'll get stuck in a pattern and we can't see, right? We have those blind spots and we can't see them. That's why they're blind spots. And we need that other person to kind of help us. So yeah, so I don't know, has your spouse gone through a retreat yet or no?
Not yet. We've been scheduled to twice for her to do it, but then the first time
Okay.
she just started a new job, and then the second time she she's very unsure if she's wants to, for the simple fact of she's from Mexico and a completely different culture, so she doesn't understand the veteran element of things. Up until I'll caveat off of that, up until she got a job here recently at the Idaho State Veterans Home.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So
Okay. So before we
so
dive into
now,
that, So before we
yeah,
dive into that real quick, so the reason why I say, oh, right, it doesn't, one of the neat things I've always found, you'll probably agree with this, with veterans, like when we get together, like all of the other things that, it doesn't matter, like our background, our experiences, it doesn't even matter what branch of service we were in. We get together and we know we're in a group of commonality, right? And it's that commonality that bonds us. And honestly, is so powerful for individual retreats, the spouses retreats, the couples retreats, the families retreats. Because all of a sudden, right
yeah,
now, that like the spouse goes, "Gosh, it's not just my husband. It's not just our marriage, right? It's not just me not providing something for my spouse." Or we as veterans get there and we go, "Oh, I'm not the only angry kid in the room, right?" I used to
right,
refer to
right,
myself as the dark cloud in the storm for my family, right? And when
yeah,
I went to my ORW Foundation retreat, there were several other fellas who were feeling just like I was and kind of in that same place I was. So just getting into a room where you go, okay, hey, like I'm normal, whether it's the veteran, the spouse, the kids, I'm normal. And there's just this unique set of experiences and circumstances around our dynamic, our relationship. However, like we can grab these tools, whether it's
Yeah.
going to one of the retreats, whether it's the service dog. We have a guest coming up in a future episode where we're going to be discussing the alpha stem, which I've talked about before. I love my alpha stem. And so I really think it's almost like getting around that common group and that bond. I don't know your thoughts on that.
No, it is. Like, for example, I've had a hard time at a lot of other jobs because I've been the only vet. Nobody else can relate to anything I have or say or anything like that. And even here coming to Lowe's, like we have this Lowe's store here has, I can't remember how many vets, but a lot of them are Vietnam era, and Korea and stuff. And it's just being around them. I could have an off day and they can tell it. They pick up on it right away, talk to me for a few minutes, give me a pat on the back, give me a hug, whatever whatever I need.
Nice.
And just knowing that they're there just brings you up personally.
Oh yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, the more you are around those people who think the way you think, for the most part, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, yeah. It's that common understanding, right? Um,
Yeah,
and I think it's cool, like saying, like you're working at Lowe's around these other veterans, and you even pointed out, right? Like Vietnam, like they're not from the same conflicts that you and I served in. They understand though the experience, like they get it, right? And I think
yeah,
I think that's that important piece right there is having those people around us who understand it and can get it. So when we do come in and we can't explain the anger or we're down and depressed, any human, right, comes into a setting and environment, oftentimes like it's that empathy piece, right? That unseen element of can someone in the room understand me or get me so I don't feel like
right.
I'm the only one. You said you also worked like a sheriff's deputy, I think you said.
Yeah, I was a sheriff deputy. Yep. I had my lieutenant at the time was a Marine, but him and I, it's funny, we didn't have that connection like I have with most vets most of the time frame.
Right.
So it actually created a lot of hostility,
Okay.
to the point where I was like, I didn't like working there at all. And ultimately
Oh
I ended up
wow.
leaving, um,
Interesting.
because of that. Yeah, it was really weird. I don't want to talk bad about another vet or anything, but sometimes I think you have to be more genuine than what this individual is being.
Right.
More willing to, instead of being Billy Badass, you're more of the, hey, I went through a lot of stuff. I did a lot of things. Doesn't matter what you did. We still have that connection, and we just didn't
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another thing too, right? So like, police force, very similar organization to military. And we've heard it honestly on the show more from female veterans than male about that concept of that competition, right? It's like
Yeah,
we're in the same situation. You understand me. However, right now in this organization, we're still competing against each other for that promotion or that look or that next position, right? And so
right.
I wonder. That's interesting because I almost wonder if he was still in that place, like mentally, of oh yeah, I'm still competing against Brian. So Brian's not. I'm not looking to be supportive or friends. He's my competition. How can I kind of get ahead of him? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I think that's kind of what it seemed like. And even since I've been out, you still see that. One of the best things, not best things, but one of the things I've seen since I've been out is there's a competition between veterans. It almost seems like, especially with social media. Um, it's it's how can I be better than this one? Or like, for example, I know a couple of guys who are always comparing their injuries and their scars and their things that they've had from their time in service, and that dictates what percentage they get from the VA, for example, dictates who's
Uh,
gone through more stuff.
right.
When we eat our own half the time, it seems like,
Well,
unfortunately.
one of the things that we discussed at the ORW Foundation retreats, right,
Yeah.
is that idea of like, we get this, basically growth strategy, and so it's getting us to look ahead, right? One of the things I like
Yeah.
to say as the team leader is it's like that navigation, and all of us can understand navigation. You get in your car, you know where you're at. You're sitting in your car, probably at your house. You say, "Hey, I want to go to the grocery store." There's 2 points there. There's where you're at and where you're going, right? So as
Right. Right.
vets, at the retreat, what we learned to do is say, okay, well, who am I now? Like, who is Guy? Who is Brian? Like, who am I right now? Like, not who was I, right? Those are experiences that shape who we currently are. They don't define who we are or who we're going to be. So it's defining
Right.
who am I at, who am I now, and then who do I want to be, right? And then that builds that
Yep.
roadmap. And then at the retreats, we come home, from the individual retreats, you come home with an individual growth strategy. From the couples retreats, you come home with a really cool couples growth strategy. And I have found that that's worth its weight in gold. I've also found, like you, when we get around a lot of veterans who, we don't know what we don't know. True of all humans, and
Yeah.
they know their former career, they know their former identity, and if they haven't been helped, like given a tool to be able to look forwards, then that's where they're stuck. It's almost like a time capsule. I was that.
Oh,
Did you kind of
definitely.
have? Yeah. Did you kind of have a similar experience at the individual like that? Kind of helping you look forward. How was that for you?
Yeah. With everything I experienced with him, it definitely gave me a different outlook. It definitely actually pushed me to going, okay, what what common ground can I find with him? What can I capitalize on to be able to, I guess, coexist with him in the same sheriff's office, especially since he was my supervisor.
Right.
Um, so we had to find that ground, and we have found it, and we have worked with each other a bit around it. But ever since that experience, I've been more uh, cognitive of what I'm saying, who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about, and making sure I don't get into that kind of contest of who's Billy Badass and who isn't type of deal.
Yeah, and I think that's cool, right? Like that self awareness to be able to understand kind of where you're at and where you're coming into that conversation, and then also knowing that boundary for yourself, right? Another thing that we've talked about on the podcast before, that boundary of, hey, I'm not here to like compare, experiences and traumas, right? I'm here to engage as a human, and I'm trying to do better for myself, and hopefully I can in some way help you, the person I'm talking to, do better for yourself. I think that's
Oh, definitely.
yeah, and I think that's such an important skill. I definitely think though that's a learned skill. So other than going to the ORW Foundation retreats, I know we talked about you getting your service dog. What else have you done kind of on your trauma recovery, sort of PTSD recovery journey?
Well, one of the biggest things to help besides going on the retreat would be my wife. Like I've said before, she doesn't have the experience with veterans or even this kind of culture or even somewhat close because she grew down up in Mexico. But she holds me accountable and she doesn't put up with any of
Nice.
my crap. She calls me out on anything. I'm having a bad day. She just looks at me and goes, well, you might be having a bad day, but that person's probably having a bad day or that person or that person, so she's kind of me be more aware. I'll never admit this to her. Oh, no, just kidding.
Nice.
But
Too
more
late.
aware of like,
She's gonna see the podcast now.
I know, right? But more aware of other people, so that's helped me not to be so uptight with people and to be a little bit
Yeah.
more forgiving. Between the dog and my wife, I mean, anytime I go out, I used to get high anxiety, super high anxiety, and now it's calmed down because I got my dog there. Obviously he's hitting my hand, but then my wife holding me accountable. There's things that I see where I might reach over and grab my wife to kind of move her out of the way or something, and she just stops, looks at me, and goes, "I'm a big girl." You don't need to protect me. I can take care of myself.
Mhm.
And what that does is cause me to kind of go back and go, okay, well, how can I not do that in the future? So it's making me more self aware of how I present myself to my wife, which ultimately I want to, appease because I don't want to, definitely don't want another divorce or anything like that.
Right.
Um, so because of that, it's made me more and more self aware to where I do a lot more of the things that I was taught through the retreat,
Yeah, probably some of the grounding techniques.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. The grounding techniques. Yep.
yeah, that's one I've talked about before where, that's one you can even do like with kids. I don't know if you have kids or not, but you can,
Yep.
if you feel yourself starting to get worked up and you're in the car, it's like, hey kids, name five, each of you name five things you can see, right? Like, boom. Okay, here's five things we can see. Okay. Four things we can, smell or hear, right? And so on and so forth. Just working to pull back into the senses. I think what you keep saying and the key unseen element here is that self-awareness, because I think a lot of veterans and all us humans alike, right? We go
Yeah.
into new settings or we go into new experiences and we're looking around the room and we're almost kind of like taking stock and judging everyone else in the room, trying to figure out like who is judging us. Whereas when you flip that, right, the way your wife's kind of helped you and what you're working towards, and you have that self awareness, and you're like, okay, like who else seems like they're maybe having a bad day? I can go chat with them and cheering them up. I'm probably that's probably going to pull me along too. And I think that's super valuable. I know that's something that on a previous episode, John and I had talked about is instead of walking into the room judging everyone and kind of like being standoffish or like doing this kind of number, right? Like actually looking around
Yeah.
the room
Yeah.
going, who do I think might be like me or who like, oh, that person seems like they might be having a bad day. Maybe I can go chat with them and help them out with something. I think that's super cool. And I
Yeah.
think that's awesome growth for you, bro.
Yeah. It's like, it's pretty interesting you mentioned something like that because having a dog, as I'm sure you're aware, that makes you have to come out of your shell because everybody wants to see him. Everybody wants to know what they're about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
Like I get
sure.
it. It's amazing. Actually, I should have brought the award out, but Loki just got presented an award for making everybody happy. Because when I first get to
Nice.
work, yeah, it's funny. Is when I first get to work, like usually I'll have his leash on, and I won't have his vest on because he's not quite on duty. It's 5 a.m. and
Yeah.
I'll take his leash off, and he'll run to the door, and then he runs inside and says hi to everybody around there. And there's people that have really, really, really bad days. Like this one lady, my boss, she found out a family member passed yesterday, and in the middle of it, she's working and she still
Yeah.
has a job to do. So I recognized that because she showed me the text about it, and I gave her a little bit of a hug and just like hang in there. And then Loki instantly came over to me from his bed, and I just took his vest off. I set him on the counter and let him go up to her, and he what we call booped her, with his nose, going, "Hey, pet me, pay attention to me,"
Mhm.
and that just brightened her day like that much more.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the dog makes you makes you come out of your shell a little bit.
You're right. It does, and I never thought about it that way. Right. So like my dog Finn, on his vest, I have ask to pet. He's not a barrier dog. He does pressure and he does distraction, and
Uh huh.
it was really cool because Finn's I think it's like 115-pound German Shepherd, right? Big dog.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it's the kids. The kids want to come up and pet, so the parents will kind of walk up and be like, "It's okay, yeah, cool." And Finn understands enough, has enough awareness that he'll lay down and let the kids kind of reach in and pet him, which I find to be really cool. And you're right. It brings that level of anxiety way down because now it's almost like instead of us having to go figure out who wants to engage and chat with us, the dog kind of found those people, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
bringing them
Yep.
in, and it's kind of helping us realize like, okay, I'm not still in combat. Like, no one's here to like try to kill me or in my life or anything negative, right? Like these are just other people going about their day, and I can interact with them, and it's cool, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing because speaking of all that, like that's one thing I found with him is there's people like, for example, when I first got him, we were at a water park in Boise, and
Nice.
his heckles came up, and he was just cued in on this guy, and this guy walked by and just gave it a sideward glance and just stopped for a second and looked at him, and his lips curled up, and he was just about ready to go, and I just kind of reached down, petted him. I'm like, okay, I'm already amped, my heart's racing, blood pressure, everything's up, and as soon as I reached over and touched him, the guy just walked away, and as soon as he walked away, it's like he completely changed 180 degrees, got up in my lap, licked my face a bunch, and got me to calm right back down.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that walking around too, I've learned to trust him more because those people you watch see him and they turn around and walk the opposite direction.
Yeah.
They won't come near him at all.
Yeah, for sure.
Which has helped my anxiety. It's dropped that down, going, okay, I can trust him more, which ultimately has helped me learn to trust more and more of society.
Yeah. You're right. Because the dog by extension, right, is kind of taking off that load that a lot of our anxieties are based around. When we were in service, it was like,
Right.
okay, I gotta check all these people. I see all these people. Like, what are they doing? Who's okay? Who's not? Right. And then
Yep.
once you've done that enough times, right, or you've had those experiences where it did turn out to be bad, right, that trauma reinforces that fear. Then all of a sudden it's like it's a switch we can't turn off, right? It's an
Right.
impossible switch to turn off until we have, like in your instance, you have the service dog and or your wife who are saying like, hey, like I'm okay, or hey, we're okay, or these people are okay, and then it lets us kind of like unload that piece, right? That anxiety,
Yeah.
and you're right, kind of like bring that back down. I think that's super cool, man. So a common question, I hope you're ready for this one, that we ask
Sure.
guests on the show is if you could go back in time and tell your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? And before you answer that, I'm going to ask everyone new to the show to do me a favor. Reach down there, hit the like and subscribe. While you're down there, check out the link for Operation Red Wings Foundation. It's free retreats, whether you're a veteran, a spouse, couples, or families. Come. There is all kinds of tools you can learn that will help you with the stuff Brian and I are talking about. And I want to address one thing, just the perspective that you voice from your spouse, right? Is that she comes from a different culture, and there's probably even a little bit of language barrier there. I have been a team leader for individuals who, English was completely their second language, whether they were from Puerto Rico or wherever. And even in couples retreats, we've had spouses who couldn't even read English, and it didn't matter, right? Like,
Yeah.
getting into that group, getting with the group of veterans where people understand you, or getting with the spouses so you understand it's just not my marriage, it's just not my husband. Same with the couples and the family retreats, is so powerful. And oh, by the way, we have tools to be able to handle that language barrier. So, okay,
Right.
I just said a bunch. Hopefully you had some time to think about it. What do you got for me?
All right. Rephrase the question one more time.
All right, I sure will.
Short-term memory, man.
Hey, bro, I get it. So you jump into that time machine, you pop back in time, you see young Brian, you get to drop one nugget, one piece of information on him. What is it? What are you telling him?
Don't worry so much about what everybody else is doing. Worry about yourself.
Yeah, powerful. And he goes straight in
Yeah.
line with that self-awareness piece, that unseen element that you've been talking about this whole show.
Yeah. It's, we spend so much time, especially when you get out, worrying about what everybody perceives about yourself. It's like I spent a lot of time going, kind of go toot my own veteran horn,
Yeah.
And the more I did it, the more I looked around and go, people are turned off by that. So now where
yeah.
I just naturally let it happen. I don't need to say anything or anything like that, and one vet, walking down the street, I may never see you. and walking down, you're going to see something about you, or you're going to see something about me, or you kind of look, well, wait a minute here. I think that guy might be, yeah. And then me, I always make some smart aleck remark or something saying Army or Marine, just by the way they're walking or something. And,
Yeah,
if it's a
nice.
Marine, I'll be like, hey, here's a couple of color crayons for you guys or something like that, just to break that ice.
I love it.
Uh,
I love it,
but
man.
it always breaks that ice, to where if they even didn't know how their day, it always brings out a smile. And that's a gift I got from a big one from the retreat is being around a bunch of people that have had way more different experiences than I have had through my military career. But we all have the same style of trauma
Yeah.
that kind of bonds us,
Oh, for sure.
where we do rely on each other big time, but yet at the same time, we don't know who's in the crowd when you're walking through there. So therefore, you're able to kind of look and pick and choose who you talk to, but it also makes you kind of come out of your shell because you don't know who's been in the military.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, to think about that idea of like, so trauma is trauma, right? It doesn't
Yep.
matter, how there's no like scale for like how big or small the trauma was. Trauma is trauma, and as humans, we're all going to experience potentially the same trauma much differently. And I think it's, going back to that self awareness piece as you've kind of brought to the forefront of this conversation is knowing that like, hey, we're going into this conversation, uh, like really just being there for each other, right? We're not going into this conversation with like, hey, what do you got? Like, well, I got this. Well, nah, that doesn't really help anyone, right? Um, and going into that conversation, like we said, right, just cracking the joke, the small talk, like bringing that
Yeah.
anxiety, those nerves down, and then finding that common bond. For us, it's you served, yep, you served, yep, okay, great, let's chat, man. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important. I think you mentioned social media way long time ago, and you said it's so crazy on social media. And my son and I, we were having this cool conversation because so my son is 9 years old. He's in the fourth grade, and their teacher was had them pick two sides, whether kids under 12 should be able to own a cell phone, right? And it was, kind of yes or no. And then they had to kind of explain their pieces. And one of the things him and I started
Yeah.
talking about was that aspect right there, which is social media, because social media is so awesome and so powerful, right? And everything good has, that bad thing to it. Yet people can almost no accountability. They can kind of say whatever they want to say. They can all sort of those things that start to come in. So I think it's cool though, your approach, especially in person, kind of
Yeah.
as you're out there nowadays. Right. And that shows a lot for like your growth as an individual and then your growth post trauma, right?
Yeah. You know, it is. And the other thing I learned was when you're, especially like for me, being in big crowds always did it for me. Especially coming from
Mhm.
law enforcement and everything else like that in smaller areas, you're bound to run into somebody that you've arrested or done something like that. And it kind of going a broad spectrum here, but it's helped me to talking to people. It's helped me to kind of pinpoint those people who, if something were to happen, I know where I could go. I know who's there. I know who's there that I could rely on with just a quick eyesight, just a quick meeting of the eyes, or hand signal or something like that to where, hey, I know that guy right there I can rely on, or that girl right there I can rely on. And that's something that's really helped me to overcome my high anxiety around crowds and around those situations is meeting other veterans out there and knowing that no matter what, something hits the fan, 99% of the time, I've got somebody right there that's going to have my back no matter what's going on, and I'll have
Yeah.
theirs. Um, so it's something that's another reason why I do that. So it's huge.
Yeah. Just finding that commonality and then finding that just oftentimes that one person, right? That one person we can chat with and engage with. I think that is huge
Yep.
because that goes back to that piece of like connection, right? Like we're showing up, making a connection off that one commonality, then having that conversation. And we're not, as you've been saying, right? Like we're going to it to kind of be like, hey, how are you? Hey, I'm okay too. Like we can get through this together, right? Versus, that like, hey, stay back because you might have done this and I might have done this, but we don't know who's like, that comparison, that kind of weird jockeying that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think of all the things we discussed today, I think the biggest piece that I'm taking away, and hopefully our audience is taking away, is really kind of that self-awareness piece. And again, an important piece of that, now a lot of times it feels to me like it's your dog doing it for you. Your spouse does it for you. It's having someone or some animal that can help give us that awareness and perspective that, okay, I'm probably not the only one in the room who's had some trauma or, might not be having a great day. Right. Also though, I'm not the only person in the crowd that, is a good person.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. We all need somebody in our lives to hold us accountable. And unfortunately, there's a lot of us, veterans that don't have somebody all the time because we've isolated ourselves. And that's one thing that's come out of the retreat too, and other things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be Operation Red Wings Foundation, but anything that can get you out and about to meet those other people, because I've got some lifelong friends now from the retreat.
Nice.
Guys that I talk to once in a while. Especially that's why I'll give a shout out to Jacob. I talk to him all the time, and I've been there for him through some things that he's been there through for me as well. And even though he's in Texas, I'm in North Idaho, so it's it's a little bit there, but it's somebody I know I could call and talk to right away that totally gets it, because he is there when some things happened between my wife and I at the foundation while I was at the retreat. So and that's why I just encourage everybody, and that's why I look at my story, because I've had, I think, a somewhat typical story for vets, that get out, especially during our era. It's just we had a tendency to pull ourselves in and not hang out with only just a core group of people, and that core group of people you hang on to until one of them's gone or somebody leaves, and then that falls apart. You've got to have more people out there. And the other biggest one it took me a while to understand was you've got to learn to be comfortable with yourself. And in order to do that, you got to become self-aware. You got to know who you are really deeply before you can share that with anybody else. And because unless you do, you're never going to have a good, solid relationship. You're never going to trust anybody out there. You're not going to be able to go out there and live a good, productive life to the best you can.
Brian, I think that was extremely well said. That felt like one of those like mic drops. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the Unseen Journey. Or Brian, sorry. Really, really appreciate it, man. So on behalf of Operation Red Wing Foundation, do us a favor, if you haven't done it already, reach down there, hit the like, subscribe, check out the link, come to a retreat. Lots of awesome things come out of the retreats, whether it's friends like Brian mentioned with Jacob, or whether it's just tools to help you gain self-awareness or just move forward in your journey, right? So on behalf of Operation Red Wings Foundation, the Unseen Journey, Brian, thank you so much. And to all our watchers, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon.